evening and welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM and UPTV. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I am here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Views expressed are those of the speakers and are not intended to represent WRFU or UCIMC, or, as we like to say on the televised version of this show, UPTV. These views are our own, and by our in this instance, I mean myself and anyone whose words I might happen to be reading, news, whatever. There are other opinions sneaking in, but they are not necessarily those of WRFU or UCIMC or UPTV. They might be. It is possible that they share those views, but it is not something that you can assume, and therefore you must assume that these are my views or something that I'm reading, and not blame anybody else but me. Just blame me. How's that? You can just blame me. Anyway, it's just sort of a grab bag of stuff here for this show. We'll make of it what we will. A lot of these are just stories from immigrants and the situations that they're dealing with. And I thought this would be interesting to read at this time and kind of give you a sense of what some people are going through and what kinds of conditions they're having to deal with. And so we'll comment as necessary as we go along, but this is mostly just people's experiences. They're sharing their experiences. So the first one is entitled Getting Out, the Human Toll of High Immigration Bonds. When the judge announced that a $5,500 bond was all that stood in the way of Pani being reunited with his 3 daughters, his heart sank. With their mother in and out of the home due to a drug addiction, the girls had been placed into foster care after Pani was detained by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and sent to Boone County Jail in rural Kentucky. Since then, a lot of the family's assets had been drained. Every week, his oldest daughter sent him a few dollars from her after-school job so that they could talk on the phone, and he could buy a few things from the jail commissary. But Pani knew that the girls would not be able to raise that much money on their own. This meant that he had to stay in immigration detention until his case was resolved. An indefinite stay in immigration jail was doubly daunting. Not only would he continue to be apart from his daughters, but he said he found the conditions at the jail horrifying. Pani was incarcerated for 6 months before he won his immigration case with the help of the National Immigrant Justice Center's detention project. After Pani was home, he talked with NIJC staff about his life inside the jail. When I arrived, I slept on the floor for a week, Pani said. Many people don't get a mattress because there are too many people, and for days they sleep only with their blanket on the floor. It's cold there, very cold. When I arrived, you're supposed to get things you need, like soap to shower, socks, but I didn't get any of that. While Pani was one of the lucky few to have legal representation, the jail did not always accommodate his conversations with his lawyer. Sometimes, when my lawyer wanted to talk, they didn't bring me to the phone room, Pani said. If they did, they would take me out of my cell at 7, or before 7 in the morning, and they would put me in a little room all day until 3 or 4 in the afternoon, when they'd return me to my cell. I don't know why they did it. One day I told them, my lawyers won't call me until 2 or 3. Why are you taking me out of my cell now? And the guard said, if you want to talk to your lawyer, then talk. If not, I'll cancel your appointment. They don't give you an option. Pani also witnessed the kind of medical neglect for which the ICE detention system is notorious. He picked up a particularly nasty case of foot fungus he suspects came from the bathrooms at the jail. This infection required several trips to the medical center to get a medication that actually worked. First, they gave him too small an amount of ineffective medication, and he was forced to go back again to get a stronger dosage, all while the fungus worsened. In addition, Pani says he witnessed others suffering as well, including people going into what he believed was diabetic shock. I saw it about 3 times, Pani said. Men who were there about to die because their sugar levels were low. They sweat a lot because the food there is not food for their sickness. When someone is sick, you have to yell or call a guard on the phone, but you also can't call on the phone because they get annoyed. They say you shouldn't call them for something like that, but I think it's an emergency. It's ugly in there. Now I'm a little traumatized because I saw so much. Eventually, Pani won his immigration case. Today he is out of ICE jail and is working to regain custody of his daughters. To do so, he needs a stable job and an address, both things he had and lost due to his unnecessary and prolonged time in ICE detention. By sending a bond Pani had no hope of paying, the federal government cost taxpayers thousands of dollars. Boone charges the government $44.65 per day to jail someone in ICE custody, and caused long-lasting harm to Pani and his family. I'm out. Now all I have to do is start again, little by little, Pani said. This is what happened in my case. There are a lot of people in that jail with different cases. It's sad, but it's past. So it's hard to comment on something like this because on one hand it is so personal. This is one person's distinct experience. And on the other hand, it's representative of what happens to a lot of people in different ways all across the country. And I guess the main thing that I want listeners to get from this is to try and think in terms of what exactly this person is accused of or has been accused of and how they were treated. Now, on one hand, you could say no one really deserves to be treated like this, regardless of their crime. I know that the punishment system in the U.S. is designed, if not directly, at least indirectly, to be punitive, to actually punish you for things. So if you go to jail, it's not supposed to be nice. A lot of people will say, well, it's jail. You're not supposed to have a good time. It's not supposed to be comfortable and all these different things. But it kind of goes against the whole notion of being innocent until proven guilty to treat people like that in jail, since most people who are in jail are on their way to being sentenced for something. Prison is a slightly different thing. But either way, what this person is accused of, these are immigration violations. They don't say exactly what his is, but apparently he got out. And so whatever it wasn't something that they could make stick on him. And yet the whole time he was there, he was treated as if he was not even a person. I don't even know if you treat animals like that necessarily. In fact, I would go so far to say that if you did an expose on like the dog pound, and you found that people were treating dogs like that everyone would be outraged. And yet somehow this is just passed off as, oh, well, it's too bad, but it shouldn't be that way. But, like there's nothing we can do about it, and there are other problems. But these are humans. They are human beings who are being treated like this out of prejudice and bigotry. I can't think of any other reason. It's not because you can say, oh, well, look at these crimes they're committing. This is not like a jail for rapists where people say would have this visceral response to rape and go, oh, that's the most horrible crime. I can't even be nice to you. If you're suffering, well, consider the suffering of your victims. It's not like that. This is immigration offenses. This is somebody that is accused of not having the right paperwork or being in the wrong place at the wrong time or something like that. I mean, it's inoffensive to the max, and yet they're treated like they're some sort of awful, horrible people that don't deserve even basic human decency, even treatment that you would give an animal. So I don't have any grand point with this except that, it's one very small portion of one person's very personal story, but it is a huge window into an entire system that is flawed and broken and really, really, really needs to be just utterly reworked from the ground up, rebuilt, torn down and rebuilt from the ground up. Our entire system based around these notions of immigrants as being invaders of some sort, it has to be destroyed. We have to change it. Anyway, okay, I'm going to move on because I'm just going on and on about this. So the next story is entitled, When Coming Home from the Airport Takes Longer Than the Flight from Zimbabwe. So this is Jonahs' story. It's been a little over a year since Jonah and his wife arrived at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport from Zimbabwe. After asking for asylum, I was then arrested, which was the part that I didn't expect. I was put in handcuffs and I was speechless because I thought it was a different process, Jonah said. In that time, he'd been separated from his wife, thrown into immigration detention for 3 months, missed the birth of his child, won asylum, and gotten a job at Heartland Alliance, the organization that helped to put him in touch with his immigration lawyers, pro bono attorneys Andrew Neeland, Michael J.B. Pitt, and Andrea Sill of Barak, Ferrazano, Kirschbaum, and Nagelberg, LLP. I don't think I pronounced that very well, but there you have it. So Jonah left Zimbabwe last fall as a member of an opposition political party. He often found himself threatened by governmental organizations, including the military. They want to silence the opposition, so there are a lot of abductions and a lot of beatings and torture, he said. I would say there is no right to express yourself. He hardly expected that the asylum process would involve experiences that felt like a state-sanctioned abduction, which included middle-of-the-night transfers to different detention centers and a lack of information about how his case was proceeding. They just wake you up at 12 midnight and they say, "You're going," Jonah said. "You don't know where you're going, and when I asked them, 'Where am I going?' the guy told me, 'We are going to immigration.'" This was the only preparation Jonah had for his credible fear interview, a critical step in the asylum process. The outcome of the credible fear interview can determine whether or not someone is granted the right to defend their case in court or is deported. Jonah also said he wasn't the only one who was having a difficult time in detention. "I've seen a lot of people who are suffering," he said. "I was one of them, but I tried to be strong. We shared our stories with other inmates and offered each other advice. But being in jail traumatized me. I had never in my life been arrested, and suddenly I was in jail. You don't know whether you're going to come home or not. The whole system needs an overhaul to give people a chance to prove their case under not so intimidating circumstances." Jonah also faced some obstacles that were more unique to his situation. "The main challenge I had in detention was language," Jonah said. "Most people there did not speak English, mostly Spanish and Arabic in most instances. Although there were other Africans there like me, we don't all speak the same language, so they spoke French or something else." It was while he was in detention that Jonah first made contact with the National Immigration Justice Center. Lawyers from NIJC came to the McHenry County Correctional Center, where Jonah was being held, and helped him set up with a pro bono attorney. Jonah was granted asylum and was released from detention last December. Jonahs' story then became not only about how broken the immigration and asylum process is, but also about the networks of organizations Chicago has to help people acclimate to their new city. "Being in detention gave me a lot of time to think about what I was going to do and how I wanted to do it," Jonah said. After his release, NIJC put Jonah in touch with World Relief, which helped him complete all of the paperwork to obtain work authorization, and Upward Global, which helped Jonah prepare his resume and practice interview skills. The job Jonah ended up getting? A position with Heartland Alliance, NIJC's parent organization. "They helped me a lot at NIJC," Jonah said. "I felt like there were people who were on my side. I chose to work for Heartland Alliance not only because of the NIJC connection, but because it's part of my fulfillment journey. I am helping support worthy projects to help those marginalized in society. Okay, so Jonah is here seeking asylum, and he's treated like this. He's treated like a prisoner, like a criminal. Again, it's the same thing. It's treating people like criminals. Now, it's debatable, I suppose. We can say it's debatable whether or not criminals should be treated like criminals in the standard sense of the word. But certainly people who are not criminals should not be treated like criminals, whatever you think that treatment should be. And yet our entire system is infected from the top down with this sense of, we don't want you here. We don't need you. This process is something we'd rather not do at all. We'd rather just close these doors and shut everyone out. And so anything that you're asking us to do beyond the barest minimum is an imposition and an unrealistic demand. And that's just unacceptable in every possible way. Okay, I'm going to continue on. The next story is entitled, I Think Every Day About the People Who Are Still in Detention, Who Should Not Be There. This is Jonahs Story. My name is Jonahs Favi. I live in Indianapolis with my wife and our children. I am grateful to have the chance to be with them because only weeks ago I was in immigration detention in a county jail in Kankakee, Illinois. I was detained there for almost 1 year while my wife and I waited for the government to process the petition she filed for my green card. While I was detained, my wife gave birth to our second child and our family lost our home. I met our new baby in a picture by mail. I saw a man who was detained with me hang himself to try to commit suicide. I feel traumatized still today from all that I saw. I am 32 years old and have lived in the United States since 2013. My wife and I have 2 children, 1.5-year-old little girl and our son who is 5 months old. We are also raising my daughters from a previous relationship. She is 5 years old and has ongoing serious health issues that require regular hospital visits. I have a history of health problems too, including a severe case of pneumonia many years ago that left me with ongoing respiratory problems. In June 2019, immigration officers arrested me at the courthouse in Indiana when I appeared in connection with an old case from 2015. That case is the only time I have ever been arrested, and I paid a heavy price when I accepted a plea bargain and spent months in jail. However, because of that old conviction, I was in immigration detention for nearly a year with no bond hearing and without the possibility to see the sun or breathe fresh air. I spent night after night thinking about it, and I read about the law in the library, and I came to understand why I was disqualified from bond. It was wrong. It made me feel the system was rigged against me from the start, just like in a casino. I saw many things in immigration detention I never thought I would see. Most of the people detained have no chance, and you see that every Friday when they deport 15 or more people at a time out of a cell block of 48. Many people are deported so fast that between transfers they are unable to communicate with their families abroad or even see a judge before they leave. The rest of us who try to fight our cases felt that we were desperately waiting for our turn to be slaughtered. Some waited for a year or 2 years or 3 years, surviving on antidepressant pills. To us, detention sounds and feels more like prison. The number of people detained in my block who went from healthy to sick and had to take pills to sleep or for other health issues increased every day. I believe that more than 60% of my block was on pills during the holiday season. A week before my wife had our son, I broke down and sent a medical request for help. I was so stressed and anxious that I was unable to sleep for 3 days. To survive, it seemed we only had 2 options. First, read the Bible and pray for God's mercy, or second, take a pill not to go crazy. Guards often called out to inmates to make a line for medications using jokes they thought were funny, like medicina para locos, which in Spanish means medicine for the crazy. When I first got to the jail, I remember there was a man there who had been detained for 15 months and was trying to fight his case. One day he just broke down and grabbed a paper and wrote, "I would like to be deported ASAP." And the next week, Immigration and Customs Enforcement put him on a flight, just like that. Being in that jail for so long, it felt like torture. ICE has the power to free you, but they don't want to. It's on purpose. Keeping you in jail gets to your mind, to your soul, so you want to give up on your freedom and even on your life. We first started hearing about the COVID-19 virus from the news. The officers would say to me often when I asked to watch the news, "You again with that story," like it was a joke or fake news. But to me it was not a joke because my life was in danger and my children were outside depending on me. It is very stressful to be detained during this pandemic because you cannot take care of your own health and safety. At the beginning of the outbreak, the facility did not give us any instructions on how to prevent the spread of the virus. No one told us to wash our hands or avoid touching our faces. They did not distribute gloves, masks, or hand sanitizer. The guards did not maintain social distance. They would come close to us and speak to us. It is impossible to practice social distancing in detention. I was housed in an open dorm in a block that held 48 people. The dorm was split into 12 cubicles with dividers, and each cubicle had 4 people sharing one toilet and one sink. We had to line up closely together to receive meals and then sit closely together at a table, just like at a restaurant or food court. I was always worried for my family. Before I was detained, I used to work 2 or 3 jobs at a time to make sure we could afford to live in a safe neighborhood. I was their provider, but then ICE took me away. We lost our house, and my wife had to leave almost everything we had and move when she was pregnant. My wife had to try to care for the children herself while working all her shifts at the post office. I worried so much for my daughter who has special needs. Who would be able to take her to the hospital? Who would be there for them? The government had scheduled my wife and me for our visa interview on March 23rd, but then on March 20th, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services canceled it because of the virus. It seemed like my detention would have no end, and I would never have a chance to be reunited with my family. If it wasn't for my legal team at NIJC and the decision of a federal court judge, I wouldn't have the chance to be with my family today. I still live in fear that one day ICE will arrest me again and handcuff me in front of my children. I look at our life now and I know we will have to start all over again. We could have avoided this. It could have been done differently. Did ICE really think I would run away when I am a father to 3 children and they have my passport? Detention is not the solution for a civil matter like immigration, especially during this pandemic. It is wrong to put people in handcuffs and in leg cuffs as if they were in a maximum security prison. Detention camps should not be a solution to fix decades of mishandling from a broken immigration system. Handcuffing people in front of their wives and children is wrong and should stop. I think every day about the people who are still in detention and who should not be there. They lost their jobs, their lives. They were separated from their children. I never thought the United States justice system could be this wrong. Today I am given the opportunity to be their voice. Today all the immigrants that are living in those detention centers or prisons without a known date of release are counting on members of Congress to reunite the hard workers, the providers, the fathers, the mothers, and all the children to their families. Once again, prison, treated like criminals. For what? Seriously, for what? I'm going to try to fit one more story in here. I think I can do it. This is called Fernando's Long Journey Back Home. Fernando was mentally prepared to never see his children again twice in his life. The first was during a home invasion turned kidnapping he didn't expect to survive, when he prayed that his children would remain in the basement watching a movie until the robbers left. The next was when he was sitting in an immigration detention center expecting to get deported. I was 99.9% sure I would be deported, Fernando said, so I told my wife, "Be happy, find someone else." I didn't want her to be alone. My kids, I practically said goodbye to them. I was resigned to never see them again. The home invasion left him traumatized, but able to apply for a U visa, a type of visa that provides a path towards citizenship to survivors of certain crimes. The processing time for the U visa dragged on. A year, then 2, then 3 years went by, and then, in one awful year, Fernando's father, brother, and a beloved aunt all passed away within months of each other. Fernando, who had been living in the United States for 20 years and waiting his visa for another 3, still couldn't go home to see his family. In those days, I didn't care, Fernando said. I only wanted to see my family, but my mom made me see reality. You'll come, fine. How are you going to get back? In the haze of grief and trauma from so many losses in a row, Fernando became addicted to drugs. He was caught with a small amount and served 3 months in jail. When he was let out, a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officer was waiting. The next year of Fernando's life, 4 times as long as his actual prison sentence, was spent in immigration detention. The hardest thing was the separation, something I wouldn't wish on anyone, Fernando said. My son has autism, and when I would talk to him on the phone, he'd ask where I was, and I'd say, I'm working, son. And he'd ask, when will you be back? Almost, but you're the man of the house now. You have to take care of the family. Before he was imprisoned, Fernando had been his family's main breadwinner, but now an old back injury meant his wife could only work a small number of hours a week, barely enough to keep the family afloat. The lack of financial resources, compounded with the poor treatment inside the detention center, meant that without a commissary fund, Fernando often went hungry because of a lack of adequate food. I suffered a great deal of hunger, Fernando said. I decided to work in the kitchen, and that helped me a great deal. I didn't have enough money to call home, so all the money that they paid me, the little bit, I would gather it up, and during the weekend I would call for some 5 or 10 minutes, and then again wait until the next weekend. For Fernando, however, what was the most difficult was the emotional aspect of incarceration. The mental mistreatment hurts more than the physical mistreatment, Fernando said. It denigrates you as a person, and it's to a degree that you even stop believing in yourself. What made me really sad is for them to remind you of who you are to them. You could say, I'm so-and-so, but it's not true. You're just a number. Through the National Immigrant Justice Center's detention project, Fernando was given legal assistance by attorney Hannah Cartwright and Jesse Johnson, an accredited representative. They fought for his release from detention and secured his family's U visas. Today, Fernando is struggling to find a job in his field of construction and floor laying and is making ends meet with cleaning jobs, which don't pay as well. Even though Fernando has now been out of detention for a little less than a year, the experience is still with him. I would always say, when I get out of here, I'm going to leave it all behind, Fernando said. I would always say, there's a better tomorrow. But the truth is that just isn't accurate. Even now that I have documents, I'm always thinking, what's going to happen tomorrow? Are they going to stop me? Are they going to take my papers away? I don't know. When you get out, you bring the lockup with you, all the memories. You say, I'm going to forget it, but it's not true. You don't forget. It's stressful to have to live with fear all of the time.